The table was set with quiet care, the casserole still steaming as Rebecca served portions onto plates. Across from her, Eric barely glanced up, scrolling through his phone. Their 7-year-old son, Ethan, filled the silence with his usual energy, describing a class project in vivid detail. Rebecca smiled at her son's enthusiasm, but her husband's disinterest cast a shadow over the moment. "Rebecca," Eric said abruptly, interrupting Ethan's story, "do you ever think about doing something more with your time?" His tone was casual, almost distracted, but the words struck sharply. Rebecca froze, her hand tightening around her fork. "I'm not sure what you mean," she replied cautiously, trying to keep her voice even. Eric shrugged, still focused on his phone. "I don't know. Hobbies are fine, but maybe something more ambitious? Something interesting?" He glanced up briefly, then returned to his screen as if the conversation were over. Ethan's cheerful chatter stopped, his wide eyes darting between his parents. Rebecca forced a small smile for her son's sake, but her appetite had vanished. Later that night, as Eric settled into his recliner with a glass of wine, Rebecca stood in the kitchen, staring at her reflection in the window. His words echoed in her mind, stirring a mix of frustration and self-doubt. She wasn't sure what Eric wanted her to be: more ambitious, more dynamic, or simply more of someone else. With a quiet sigh, she turned off the kitchen light and climbed the stairs to bed, resolving to push the thought aside. The following morning began as usual. Rebecca packed Ethan's lunch, brewed Eric's coffee, and sat down to her freelance bookkeeping work after they left for the day. Numbers were predictable, reliable, and easier to manage than emotions. But Eric's offhand comment lingered, its weight pressing against her chest. After lunch, while cleaning the house, Rebecca ventured into the attic to put away some old boxes. Her gaze caught a dusty container labeled college. Curious, she opened it to find a stack of notebooks and a thick portfolio. She flipped it open, her breath catching at the sight of her old sketches. Each page was a burst of creativity, a flowing evening gown here, a bold asymmetrical jacket there. Rebecca's fingers traced the lines of a half-finished design, the memory of her younger self vivid in her mind. She had once dreamed of becoming a designer, but life had taken her down a different path. Marriage, motherhood, and practicality had left little room for ambition. That night, after Ethan went to bed, Rebecca brought the portfolio downstairs. She opened it at the kitchen table, flipping through the pages by the soft glow of a lamp. The urge to create stirred within her, tentative but insistent. She retrieved a sketchbook from a drawer and drew her first line in years. The weekend brought the neighborhood barbecue, a casual gathering of families in backyards filled with chatter and laughter. Rebecca arrived with Ethan, carrying her carefully prepared pasta salad. She set it down on the buffet table and scanned the yard for Eric. She found him near the grill, laughing with a group of neighbors. As she approached, she overheard him speaking. "Rebecca?" "She's fine," he said with a chuckle. "A little too quiet, though. I keep telling her to find something she's passionate about, but she's just content." His tone was light, almost teasing, but it cut deep. Rebecca's face flushed as the group chuckled politely. One of the neighbors, Carol, tried to soften the moment. "Well, contentment isn't a bad thing," she offered, but Eric waved her off. "Sure, but it'd be nice to see her do something exciting for once." Rebecca turned away before they could see her reaction. She retreated to a quiet corner of the yard, her chest tight and her vision blurring with unshed tears. Ethan found her there, tugging at her sleeve. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice small and worried. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Rebecca said, kneeling to hug him. But in her heart, she made a silent vow to prove to herself, if not to Eric, that she was capable of more. The night after the barbecue, Rebecca retrieved her old sketchbook from the kitchen drawer and set it on the table. She flipped to a blank page, staring at the pristine white surface. Her pencil hovered hesitantly, the weight of years pressing down on her. She thought of Eric's dismissive words, of the laughter at the barbecue, and of Ethan's concerned expression. The emotions swirled together, fueling her resolve. Finally, she drew a bold line, then another, and another. The shapes began to emerge, a dress with a flowing silhouette, details inspired by the natural curves of leaves. As the design took form, Rebecca felt a surge of energy she hadn't experienced in years. The doubts that had clouded her mind began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet confidence. She worked late into the night, the hum of her pencil on paper her only companion. When she finally stepped back, Rebecca stared at the finished sketch. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of pride. The next morning, Rebecca awoke with a sense of purpose. She dropped Ethan off at school, completed her freelance tasks, and then drove to a fabric store she hadn't visited in years. Rows of vibrant textiles greeted her, each bolt sparking ideas. She chose a soft navy blue fabric, its texture rich and inviting. At home, she set up her old sewing machine, its weight familiar under her hands. The first stitches were uneven, her fingers clumsy from disuse. But as the hours passed, the motions became fluid, her confidence growing with each seam. By the time the dress was finished, Rebecca felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. She hung it carefully, stepping back to admire her work. It was a small step, but it marked the beginning of something larger, a journey to reclaim the dreams she had once set aside. Rebecca stood back from the finished dress, her heart swelling with pride and nervous anticipation. It wasn't just fabric and thread, it was a manifestation of her rediscovered spirit. She hung it on the door to admire it in the natural morning light, its silhouette graceful and compelling. The soft navy blue fabric seemed to shimmer faintly as the sunlight touched it, adding depth to the folds. Ethan walked into the room, rubbing his eyes, and froze when he saw the dress. "Wow, Mom, did you make that?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. Rebecca smiled, ruffling his hair. "I did." "What do you think?" Ethan grinned. "It's amazing! You should show it to everyone." His enthusiasm was contagious, and for the first time, Rebecca considered the idea. That afternoon, she called Claire, an acquaintance from her neighborhood who had once mentioned working with an artisan collective downtown. When Rebecca explained her situation, Claire was thrilled. "Rebecca, I know exactly where your work belongs. Come by tomorrow, and I'll introduce you to the collective. They're always looking for fresh talent." The next day, Rebecca arrived at the Artisan Collective's headquarters, a bright, bustling space filled with creativity and inspiration. Walls were adorned with paintings, racks displayed handmade clothing, and tables showcased jewelry and ceramics. Claire greeted her warmly, guiding her to a small office where a coordinator named Lisa sat reviewing portfolios. Lisa examined Rebecca's dress with a practiced eye, running her fingers over the stitching and studying the lines of the design. "This is excellent work," she said, her tone professional but impressed. "We're hosting a community showcase in 3 weeks. If you can create 2 or 3 more pieces, we'd love to include you." Rebecca's heart raced. 3 weeks felt impossibly short, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Claire squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this. I can't wait to see what you come up with." Rebecca threw herself into her work, her sewing machine humming late into the night. Her dining room transformed into a makeshift studio, with bolts of fabric stacked on chairs and sketches covering the table. The hours flew by as she pieced together her designs: a sleek cocktail dress, a flowing evening gown, and a structured jumpsuit that pushed the boundaries of her creativity. Despite her excitement, balancing her new passion with her daily responsibilities proved challenging. Ethan was her biggest supporter, often sitting beside her with his homework, offering input on colors and patterns. "What about gold for the jumpsuit trim?" he suggested one evening. Rebecca considered it and smiled. "That's a great idea. Thanks, buddy." Eric, however, was less supportive. He glanced at her workspace one evening, raising an eyebrow. "Is this going to be worth all the effort?" he asked, his tone skeptical. Rebecca hesitated, then straightened her back. "It already is," she replied firmly, surprising herself with her confidence. With only a week left until the showcase, Rebecca encountered her first major setback. As she worked on the cocktail dress, she noticed the fabric puckering along the seams. Frustrated, she realized the material was thinner than expected and wasn't holding its shape. Panic set in as she examined her options. Replacing the fabric would mean starting over, and she wasn't sure she had enough time. Ethan found her staring at the dress, her hands trembling. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked softly. Rebecca explained the problem, her voice breaking slightly. Ethan thought for a moment, then grinned. "What if you use a different material for the top? Like a mix of two fabrics? It could look cool." His suggestion sparked an idea. Rebecca rummaged through her fabric stash, pulling out a complementary piece in a darker shade. The combination was striking, and as she reworked the dress, she felt a surge of relief and gratitude. The night before the showcase, Rebecca laid out her completed pieces, inspecting each one with care. The navy evening gown flowed like water, the cocktail dress, with its mixed fabrics, exuded modern elegance, and the jumpsuit was a bold, geometric statement. She felt a swell of pride, tempered by nerves about the next day. Ethan helped her pack the garments, his excitement palpable. "You're going to blow everyone away, Mom," he said, grinning up at her. Rebecca hugged him tightly, grateful for his unwavering belief in her. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Rebecca felt a mixture of anticipation and calm. For the first time in years, she was stepping into a world she had thought she'd lost forever. Win or lose, the showcase was a testament to her resilience and rediscovered sense of self. The Artisan Collective's venue buzzed with energy as designers arrived early to set up their displays. Rebecca's heart pounded as she hung her pieces on sleek mannequins, arranging them under the soft glow of curated lighting. Each outfit represented countless late nights and moments of self-doubt, but seeing them together filled her with pride. Claire stopped by to check on her. "Everything looks amazing," she said, squeezing Rebecca's hand. "You should be proud." Rebecca nodded, offering a nervous smile. As the doors opened to the public, she took a deep breath and stepped back, watching as attendees began to filter in. The first hour passed in a blur of polite smiles and tentative questions. But as the room filled, Rebecca noticed more people pausing at her booth. A woman admired the evening gown, murmuring to her friend about its elegance. Another asked Rebecca about her inspiration, and for the first time, she spoke confidently about her creative process. Midway through the event, Rebecca noticed a woman in a sharp blazer examining her cocktail dress with a critical eye. The woman's demeanor exuded authority, and Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. "It's a bold choice," the woman said, her voice measured. "Mixing fabrics like this is risky. It could easily look disjointed, but you've pulled it off." "Impressive." Rebecca exhaled, only to have her relief cut short. However, the woman continued, "The hemline could use some refinement, and the stitching here lacks polish." She pointed to a subtle flaw Rebecca had overlooked. The critique stung, but Rebecca forced herself to smile. "Thank you for the feedback," she said, her voice steady. As the woman walked away, Rebecca replayed the comments in her mind. They weren't unkind, but they highlighted how much she still had to learn. Instead of discouraging her, the critique fueled her determination. She made a mental note to refine her techniques and push herself further. As the evening progressed, Rebecca caught sight of Eric and Ethan entering the venue. She hadn't expected Eric to come, and her nerves spiked. Ethan ran up to her, his excitement infectious. "Your booth is the best, Mom," he declared, earning smiles from nearby attendees. Eric approached more slowly, his expression unreadable. He scanned the display, pausing at the jumpsuit. "This is yours?" he asked, his tone neutral. Rebecca nodded, bracing for his reaction. To her surprise, he didn't dismiss it. Instead, he said, "It's different. Bold." Though his words were far from effusive, they carried no hint of his usual skepticism. For Rebecca, it was a small but significant step. Eric lingered at the booth, watching as others admired her work. She noticed him exchange a few words with Claire, who gestured animatedly toward Rebecca's designs. As the event neared its conclusion, a coordinator took the stage to announce awards for standout pieces. Rebecca had no expectations, focusing instead on the sense of accomplishment she felt for simply being part of the showcase. When her name was called for Most Innovative Design, she froze, her mind struggling to process the words. Ethan tugged at her arm, urging her forward. Rebecca stepped onto the stage, her legs trembling. The applause was warm and genuine, and as she accepted the award, she spotted Eric in the crowd. For the first time, his expression wasn't one of indifference, it was pride. Back at her booth, several attendees stopped by to congratulate her. Among them was the sharp-blazered critic from earlier. "Congratulations," she said, her tone sincere. "Your work has potential. I look forward to seeing where you take it." Rebecca thanked her, feeling a newfound confidence in her abilities. The ride home was unusually quiet, but it wasn't the heavy silence of before. Instead, it felt contemplative. Ethan chattered in the backseat about the showcase, clutching Rebecca's award like a prized trophy. Eric drove, occasionally glancing at Rebecca, as though seeing her in a new light. "You really put a lot into this," he said finally, breaking the silence. "It's impressive." Rebecca turned to him, her expression guarded. "Thank you," she replied, unsure of how much weight to place on his words. But for the first time, they felt genuine. As they pulled into the driveway, Rebecca felt a mix of exhaustion and contentment. She had taken a leap, faced challenges, and found a piece of herself she thought she had lost. And while Eric's acknowledgement was a welcome surprise, her greatest reward was the pride she felt in her own achievements. The morning after the showcase, Rebecca woke up to an inbox full of messages. Among them was an email from Janice, the owner of a boutique downtown. "I saw your work at the Artisan Collective," the email read. "Your designs are exactly what I've been looking for. Would you consider showcasing them in my store?" Rebecca's heart raced as she reread the message. It felt surreal that her work had caught the attention of someone in the industry. She immediately replied, expressing her interest, and within hours, Janice responded with an invitation to visit the boutique. At breakfast, Rebecca shared the news with Ethan, who beamed with excitement. "That's amazing, Mom. You're going to have your clothes in a real store." Eric, sipping his coffee, raised an eyebrow. "That sounds promising," he said cautiously. While his tone wasn't exactly enthusiastic, it lacked his usual skepticism. For Rebecca, that was progress. The boutique was a quaint, stylish space tucked into a vibrant downtown street. Janice greeted Rebecca warmly, her sharp eye for detail evident as she assessed Rebecca's portfolio and the pieces she had brought. "Your work has a distinct voice," Janice said, examining the navy evening gown. "It's elegant but approachable. My clients will love it." Rebecca couldn't help but smile at the praise. "Thank you. I'm thrilled you see potential in my work." Janice nodded. "We'll start with a small collection. 5 pieces, displayed prominently in the front. If they sell well, we can discuss expanding the line." As Rebecca left the boutique, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbled within her. This was the next step, a chance to see her work reach a wider audience. She spent the drive home brainstorming ideas for new designs, her mind alight with possibilities. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Rebecca juggled her freelance bookkeeping work, household responsibilities, and the creation of 5 new pieces for the boutique. Her dining room remained a hive of activity, with fabric, patterns, and sketches strewn across every surface. Ethan continued to be her biggest cheerleader, often suggesting color combinations or asking questions about her process. "Why don't you try green for this one?" he suggested one afternoon, pointing to a sketch of a cocktail dress. Rebecca laughed. "You're going to be my official design assistant at this rate." Eric, while still reserved, began helping in subtle ways. He picked up groceries without being asked and even took Ethan to school on mornings when Rebecca had tight deadlines. Though he didn't voice his support directly, his actions spoke volumes. For the first time in years, Rebecca felt a sense of partnership returning to their marriage. 2 days before her pieces were due at the boutique, disaster struck. While attaching the final embellishments to a tailored jumpsuit, Rebecca's sewing machine jammed, causing the fabric to bunch and tear. She stared at the ruined piece, her heart sinking. Ethan found her sitting at the table, her head in her hands. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked softly. Rebecca explained the situation, her voice shaky. "I don't have enough fabric to start over, and I can't deliver the collection like this." Ethan thought for a moment, then grinned. "What about adding a different fabric? Like a 2-tone look? It could make it even cooler." His suggestion sparked an idea. Rebecca rummaged through her fabric stash, finding a complementary piece that matched the jumpsuit's original color. She worked through the night, carefully reworking the design. By morning, the jumpsuit was complete, and even better than she had originally envisioned. The day Rebecca delivered her collection to the boutique, she felt a mix of nerves and pride. Janice examined each piece with a critical but appreciative eye. "These are excellent," she said, her approval clear. "I'll have them displayed by the end of the day." As Rebecca left the boutique, she spotted her designs through the display window, prominently featured near the entrance. Seeing her work in such a public space filled her with a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. That evening, Ethan insisted they celebrate with a family dinner. Eric, to Rebecca's surprise, suggested they try a new restaurant downtown. Over the meal, he raised his glass and said, "To Rebecca, for proving that hard work and passion pay off." His words were simple, but they carried a weight of sincerity that touched Rebecca deeply. Rebecca stopped by the boutique a week after her collection debuted, curious to see how her pieces were performing. As she walked through the door, Janice greeted her with a wide smile. "You're not going to believe this," she said, leading Rebecca toward the display. "We've already sold 2 of your designs, and I've had multiple inquiries about custom orders." Rebecca's heart soared. She stood before her remaining pieces, watching as a customer admired the navy evening gown. "It's beautiful," the woman said, running her fingers over the fabric. "Do you have more like this?" Janice quickly jumped in, offering to connect Rebecca with the client for a potential custom piece. On her way home, Rebecca couldn't stop smiling. She had always dreamed of her designs being appreciated, but seeing it happen in real time felt surreal. That night, as she shared the news with Ethan, he cheered and hugged her tightly. Even Eric managed a rare smile, saying, "That's impressive, Rebecca. Looks like people are starting to see what you're capable of." Despite the success, Rebecca found herself grappling with unexpected feelings of self-doubt. What if her current designs were just a fluke? What if she couldn't sustain this level of creativity? As she sketched ideas for her next collection, the lines felt forced, her usual flow stifled by the pressure of expectation. That evening, Eric found her sitting at the dining table, staring at a blank page. "Writer's block?" he joked, his tone uncharacteristically light. Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. "Something like that. I want to keep improving, but what if I can't?" Eric surprised her by sitting down. "You've already proven you're good at this. People bought your designs because they saw your talent. That doesn't just disappear." His words, while simple, carried a sincerity that Rebecca hadn't expected. She took a deep breath, the tension easing slightly. "Thanks," she said softly, and for the first time, she felt like he was truly in her corner. Ethan came home one afternoon bursting with excitement. "Mom, our school is having a talent showcase next month. Can you help me design a costume for my skit?" His enthusiasm was infectious, and Rebecca immediately agreed. "Of course! What's your skit about?" "It's about a knight who finds his courage," Ethan explained, his eyes sparkling. Rebecca smiled, already envisioning the design. Together, they sketched ideas and chose fabrics, turning the project into a bonding experience. Ethan's excitement reminded her of her own passion for design, reigniting her creative spark. By the time they finished, the costume was a masterpiece, bold and imaginative, yet practical enough for a school performance. Watching Ethan try it on, Rebecca felt a swell of pride. "You're going to steal the show," she said, and Ethan grinned. "Only because I have the best designer helping me." As Rebecca prepared for her next boutique collection, Janice called with unexpected news. "Rebecca, we've been invited to participate in a regional fashion showcase next month. It's a huge opportunity, and I'd love for your designs to be featured." Rebecca's excitement was quickly tempered by the tight timeline. Creating an entirely new collection in just 4 weeks seemed impossible, but Janice's encouragement pushed her to accept the challenge. "You've got this," Janice assured her. "Your work stands out, and this is the perfect stage for it." Rebecca threw herself into the project, working late into the night and experimenting with new techniques. Ethan cheered her on at every step, while Eric began picking up more of the household responsibilities, a subtle but meaningful gesture of support. As the deadline approached, Rebecca felt both exhausted and exhilarated, determined to rise to the occasion. 3 days before the showcase, Rebecca faced a major setback. While finalizing a gown, she noticed that the zipper wouldn't close properly. Panic set in as she realized she didn't have time to replace it without altering the entire dress. Desperate for a solution, she called Claire for advice. "Try a hidden lace-up panel," Claire suggested. "It'll save the design and add a unique touch." Rebecca took the suggestion to heart, staying up late to implement the change. The result was stunning, a delicate lace-up back that added elegance to the gown. When Ethan saw the finished piece, he clapped his hands in delight. "It's perfect, Mom. Everyone's going to love it." Rebecca smiled, her confidence restored. Despite the challenges, she knew she was ready to showcase her work on a larger stage. The regional fashion showcase was held in a sprawling venue, its grandeur both exciting and intimidating. Rebecca arrived early, carrying her carefully packed collection. Janice greeted her with a reassuring smile. "Your work is going to shine today," she said, guiding Rebecca to her designated area. As the models began preparing, Rebecca made final adjustments to each piece. Her collection featured a bold combination of textures and colors, each design telling its own story. The lace-up gown, now the centerpiece, drew admiring glances from the other designers backstage. Despite her nerves, Rebecca felt a growing sense of pride in what she had accomplished. When her collection was finally presented on the runway, the audience's reaction was electric. Applause filled the room, and Rebecca caught snippets of admiration. "Stunning, so innovative, who's the designer?" For a moment, she let herself bask in the validation, her hard work and resilience on full display. After the show, Rebecca was approached by several attendees, including a prominent fashion journalist. "Your collection was one of the highlights tonight," the journalist said, handing Rebecca a card. "We'd love to feature you in our next issue." Rebecca's heart raced as she thanked the journalist, still processing the words. Janice joined her soon after, beaming. "You were incredible out there. I had several boutique owners asking about your work. You might want to prepare for more orders." Rebecca laughed, overwhelmed but thrilled. The showcase had been a gamble, but it was paying off in ways she hadn't imagined. As the night wound down, Rebecca found herself searching the crowd for Eric and Ethan. When she spotted them, Ethan was practically bouncing with excitement, and Eric's expression was uncharacteristically warm. "You were amazing," Ethan declared, throwing his arms around her. Eric nodded, his voice steady. "You've come a long way, Rebecca. I'm proud of you." The days following the showcase were a whirlwind of activity. Rebecca's designs gained traction, and her inbox overflowed with inquiries and opportunities. Among them was an invitation to collaborate with a well-known designer, an offer that both excited and intimidated her. Ethan remained her constant cheerleader, but it was Eric's transformation that surprised her the most. He began taking a more active interest in her work, asking questions about her designs and even offering to help manage her growing schedule. One evening, he sat with her as she reviewed sketches for her next collection. "You've built something incredible," he said, his tone genuine. "I didn't see it at first, but now I get it. I see you." Rebecca looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and relief. For years, she had longed for his acknowledgement, but now she realized she didn't need it to validate her worth. Still, hearing it felt like a step toward healing. Ethan's school talent showcase was a special day for the family. Watching him perform in the night costume they had designed together brought Rebecca immense joy. His confidence on stage mirrored the journey she had taken, finding courage, embracing challenges, and emerging stronger. After the performance, Ethan ran up to her, grinning from ear to ear. "Did you see me, Mom? I was awesome." Rebecca laughed, pulling him into a hug. "You were amazing, sweetheart." Eric stood beside them, his arm around Rebecca's shoulders. "He gets it from you," he said quietly, his words carrying a weight that spoke volumes. That night, as the three of them sat together, Rebecca felt a deep sense of contentment. Her journey had brought her closer to her son and had rekindled a partnership with her husband she thought was lost. They weren't perfect, but they were stronger, and together, they were ready for whatever came next. Years later, Rebecca's name was synonymous with innovation in the fashion world. Her designs graced runways and boutiques alike, but her proudest achievement was the impact she had on others. Through workshops and mentoring, she shared her story, inspiring countless women to rediscover their passions and embrace their potential. At home, life remained grounded. Rebecca's studio was filled with sketches, fabrics, and the hum of creativity, but it was also a space where Ethan often joined her, now an aspiring designer himself. Together, they worked on projects, their bond as strong as ever. Rebecca kept her first collection in a place of honor, a reminder of the moment she chose to reclaim her dreams. And though her success had exceeded her wildest expectations, she never forgot the journey it had taken to get there. Her legacy wasn't just in the garments she created but in the life she built, a testament to courage, resilience, and the power of believing in oneself.